Hello, my name is Lorraine O'Donnell. I'm Research Associate at QUESCREN, Quebec English-speaking Communities Research Network, and I would like to welcome you to our Lunch and Learn event entitled The Social Solidarity Economy and Quebec's English-speaking Communities. Before continuing, I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today in a virtual platform, Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodian of these lands and waters. Tiohtià:ke, or Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and today it's a home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. And those of you who have been following QUESCREN activities in recent years, we are making ongoing efforts to reach out, especially to English-speaking Indigenous communities in the province. We're excited to have with us today Hugh Maynard, who will speak about the importance of socioeconomic development and the solidarity economy in enhancing the vitality of English-speaking communities of Quebec. And it's fun to have Hugh in front of the screen. He's also been our indefatigable tech support for many of our events. So thank you, Hugh. We're very, very pleased to have you today. Jason Prince is also with us, and he will be the moderator of today's event. So before handing the mic over to Jason, I would like to introduce Jason Prince. He's an urban planner with 2 decades of experience in community economic development. Between 2008 and 2013, Jason led a research action project at McGill University's School of Urban Planning in collaboration with community groups about the impact of the McGill University Health Center that was being built at the time. Jason also worked to shape Montreal's first community benefits agreement signed with the McGill University Health Center in 2012, while working with coalitions at the local and regional levels to change how Montrealers move in the city. Jason is the author of 2 books on public transportation. He currently teaches courses on social economy and public policy at Concordia's School of Community and Public Affairs, and he coaches nonprofit businesses as a social economy agent with PME Montréal Centre-Ville. So we're very, very pleased to have Jason with us as well. And at this point, I would like to acknowledge that this event was made possible through the financial support of the Secretariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise. Before we hand it over to Jason, I guess I will hand over the mic first to William Flock, the Secrétaire adjoint of the Secretariat. William.
Okay, thanks, Lorraine, and thanks everybody for participating in this event. I just maybe would make a couple of introductory comments. One is that first of all, I'd really like to express our appreciation for the work that Lorraine O'Donnell and all of the team at QUESCREN do in terms of organizing these events on an ongoing basis. Obviously, we're pleased to support them because I think one of the key benefits is that we draw together through these events decision makers, sometimes from government, as well as community representatives, community activists, and members of the research community, university-based research community. And I think that I guess the really key contribution that QUESCREN makes is to bring those types of people together to build knowledge, disseminate knowledge, and reflect. So I'm very pleased that we're able to support QUESCREN, and I very much appreciate the work that Lorraine and her team have been doing with us over the last couple of years. in terms of this particular topic here today, I would almost put it in the category of, it fits with a number of messages that we heard in consultations that we conducted at the Secretariat since our creation just over 4 years ago. We heard that English-speaking communities often felt kind of out in left field to a certain extent. The notion that in policy terms, they were a square peg in a round hole. There was a sense of feeling disconnected from some things happening in broader Quebec society, and especially with areas where the government was supporting and being involved. And I think that social economy definitely falls into that niche. We know from lots of data and just, I guess, just observed practices that there's been a long-standing tradition of volunteerism in English-speaking communities. So being active volunteers, supporting community-based organizations, donating, giving of one's time. These are from different general social surveys done by StatsCount over the years. We know English speakers are deeply involved in those kind of activities. So that's there. But on the other side, we have an ecosystem of social economy supported by the government of Quebec, and English-speaking communities tend not to be there. So there's this odd kind of disconnect where there's a very vibrant ecosystem and government programs designed to support it, and a community practice over here, and they've been somewhat disconnected over forever, I guess. So I think we're encouraged to support this initiative and work in this direction to try to connect those pieces. So I'm looking very much forward to hearing from Hugh Maynard and from the discussion here today. And it's something that Secretariat would be interested in supporting going forward as well. So thank you for that opportunity to share those thoughts with you, and I look forward to the session.
Thank you, William. Those were on the mark. Very pertinent comments. Very appreciated. I think that you've really nailed a part of the Anglophone reality in Quebec with those remarks. So my job is, as Lorraine mentioned, my job will be to animate our exchange today. We're going to have we're very lucky to have Hugh Maynard. I'll tell you a little anecdote about Hugh and I. I first met him about 2009, 2010, when he cold contacted me from way out there on the edges. He was bringing a gang of about 20 people from around the world to explore ways in which we can improve our environment. He is with specific examples. So Hugh Maynard is one of these super connectors in my impression. He's actually a consultant. He's the owner of Kanglo Communications and Consulting, which is an enterprise which focuses on communications, strategic planning, and development initiatives, mostly in the agricultural and rural communities in Quebec. But in a community context, Hugh is past vice president of the Quebec Association for Lifelong Learning. He served as a representative of numerous community organizations, including school boards and a career education center. So as I mentioned, he's a fellow of LEAD Canada, Leadership in Environment and Development, after completing a 2-year professional development program. So in 2008, he became an associate trainer with LEAD International, as well as with the Global Reporting Initiative as part of LEAD Canada's professional development programming. He was also a social enterprise, social economy enterprise, and social finance coach with Inaweave, and director of the community newspaper, The Gleaner, which he saved from possible destruction, implosion, and is now operating as a social enterprise in the Montérégie West region. So, with great pleasure, I'll now pass the floor to you, Hugh.
All right, thank you, Jason, for that introduction, and Lorraine and Bill for words of welcome. And I guess, given that I'm usually the technologist in these presentations, I have no room to screw up at all, right? Given that it's my own presentation. But I've got Nina working with me, so hopefully everything will go okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Beautiful spring day as we're emerging out of this fairly long winter. And hopefully I can give you some knowledge and background and insight into the social economy, and looking at the participant list, a very impressive list of people, all of you involved in the English-speaking community in and in the social economy in different ways. So let's take a look at the social solidarity economy in Quebec's English-speaking communities. So my presentation today is a bit of a personal story, how I got involved with the social economy and community development in general, some insights into the social solidarity economy, and then lastly, how we can, I think, take this sector, this initiative, this concept into building the English-speaking community in Quebec for future years. One of the questions that I have always had in my role working in English-speaking community, in sustainable development and agriculture, whatever I've been involved with, has been what are others doing to build, maintain, and enhance their community? Always impressed with the Francophones hors du Québec in how they organized and very focused and very determined on maintaining their community. In Manitoba, they have a federation of Francophone municipalities. You know, it's there to protect their communities, to enhance their development, all those other good things. And I always, these kinds of things always intrigue me, is that, you know, what's going on there? What are they doing? And how can we look at some of those things for the English-speaking community in terms of our development efforts? And it's asking that question that at a certain point, I forget when exactly, but brought me into the social economy. So this is very quickly my own direct experience in the social economy and social enterprise, if you will. You'll see at the top left the logo for the Quebec Farmers Advocate, which is still being published on a monthly basis by the Quebec Farmers Association. And at the time, I was the editor and eventually the publisher. And the Advocate was a separate non-profit organization from the Quebec Farmers Association, which was a professional syndicate. And it was created that way so it could be run essentially as a wholly owned subsidiary, as a non-profit enterprise of the Farmers Association, which was a professional association of farmers. And I worked there for nearly 20 years and never realized in all that time I was working for a social enterprise. I was just working for a non-profit. It never occurred to me that what I was, you know, employed as was very much a social enterprise that sold subscriptions and published a paper and sold advertising and generated revenue for a social purpose, and that was to inform the English-speaking farmers of the province. And of course, there was no profit. There was a surplus some years that went back into the newspaper and the general activities of providing information. I've also since then realized that yes, it was a social enterprise, and have been directly involved as a consultant in role of developing two social enterprises. One was the Coop Solidarité Bioproduit on the Lower North Shore in cooperation with the Coasters, which was a cooperative to take the non-timber forestry resource, so that's everything but trees, and look at ways to develop them sustainably into economic activity, because of course in that area with the cod moratorium, a lot of economic activity and employment had been lost with the demise of the cod fishery. So I worked with them to help to establish that, and eventually they started producing products from the wild berries in the area, notably the bake apple. And then in recent years have worked with CAMI on the Magdalen Islands to set up a social enterprise to carry out and develop, which they have, their heritage and cultural activities around the English-speaking community on Grosse Île, which is one of the islands within the Magdalen Islands, and connected into the tourism business, which is the second largest business on the islands after the fishery as well. And they started a bakery, Grandma's Bakery, and a lot of other associated activities to create employment and economic opportunities for the community, in addition to the lobster sector, which is what predominates employment in the English-speaking community. And then lastly, the Gleaner, which Jason mentioned, which is our local community newspaper in the Chateauguay Valley, Ormstown and Huntingdon, which was closed in 2018 by the media chain. And a group of us got together and formed a committee, which led to the formation of a nonprofit social enterprise. We purchased the title to the Gleaner for $1, very symbolic, and did a GoFundMe campaign, a subscription campaign, and raised the money. And we're back in business for the last few years, even despite the pandemic. And it really is, it's been a superb experience, and it's been a huge help to the community, because we were drifting apart because we didn't have a community newspaper that could keep us informed. So that's just a little bit of background on some of the direct involvement I've had in developing social enterprises. So let's go a little bit further afield and take a look at what is the social economy, the social solidarity economy, and what are social enterprises, because these are terms that get thrown around, and just to have some common understanding of what they mean. So in the social economy, and I'm not going to delve into all the details about these things because you can just type it into Google and you can read about it yourself, but just as a primer. So the social economy is essentially primacy of the individual and social objectives over capital. Obviously the cooperatives come to mind straight away, but also nonprofits and trusts and others. And the objective of the social economy is not just to make money, but it's to have meaningful employment. It's to help develop community. A lot of the aspects within this, the Sustainable Development Goals would be quite familiar in this sector. And of course, when you're running a business, social enterprise, you still need some capital, but it's not the primacy of what you're doing. You're not there just to make a profit. The other two big pieces are that, of course, you have a membership in your enterprise. Co-ops have members, nonprofits have members, and it's not just about the shareholders who has the most money to purchase a piece of your company. It's one person, one vote. And of course, those who are users of the services or the purchases of the goods have an opportunity to be members as well. And perhaps people are familiar with what used to be the Mountain Equipment Co-op, which unfortunately met its demise for various reasons, but you could become a member of that store. And those of you who bank with the Caisse Populaire des Jardins, that's a credit union, Caisse Populaire, and that's a social enterprise as well. And the last piece is democratic governance, that there is a board of directors of some form, that people have a chance, and you probably know that if you're a member of the case, you get a request every year. Would you like to be on the board? Would you like to participate in this? And so these are the very key distinguishing features of the social economy over other economic structures. The social solidarity economy, which we've adopted to use in some of the work that we're doing, of course, then takes it a little bit further than just social enterprise, because you can, even as a social enterprise, you can even act pretty much like a business, because you're serving a membership. And this is not with any criticism, but for example, the Solio Cooperative Group, which is headquartered here in Quebec and the largest agricultural co-op in the country. It's an $8 billion organization, and it is a commercial enterprise first and foremost, and it has social economy aspects to it. And so the solidarity part takes it a little bit further, that it's not just about business. There are ethical and value-based approach to the economic development, very much elements of the Sustainable Development Goals again, and that the enterprise has to have an angle of people and planet over profits and blind growth. So it's not just about doing business, it's about ensuring some very key and fundamental elements, some values around human society. And then finally, social enterprises. What are we talking about when we talk about a social enterprise? Well, cooperatives are probably the most commonly known, where a group pulls together, structures it as a cooperative, and the cooperative generally either purchases from its members, such as agricultural cooperatives, which purchase the grain from the farmers, or they sell to their members, cooperative stores, cafes, those kinds of enterprises. There are many variations on that structure, including worker cooperatives where people form a group to be able to work together rather than as a company where you have partners and employees and shareholders. And an offshoot of cooperatives, of course, is mutuals, most of which are involved in the insurance sector, but there are other types of mutuals as well. And that's essentially where you, as members, pool your money as the capital that you need to be able to pay, obviously, for the payments for the indemnity when there's some kind of insurance that has to be paid out. The most common form, although it's difficult to quantify, are nonprofits, because when you register a nonprofit, there's no designation, strictly speaking, that you're a social enterprise. You can register a nonprofit as many of the organizations of the people present, and you can do a lot of different activities, including charitable activities as a nonprofit. And so it is, for example, when you go into the registrar of these entreprises, it's very difficult to determine what's a social enterprise and what's not, but it is a form of social enterprise. And so the examples that I noted before is obviously the Lower North Shore Co-op is a co-op, and the L'Entreprise Sociale des Îles on the Magdalen Islands is a non-profit. So it depends on what you want to accomplish, the structure that you need to operate, and many other factors. And lastly, a small amount of the social enterprises can be formed as trusts, and that is becoming particularly more common, I guess, around land trusts, where groups of people form a trust to be able to preserve the natural habitat or other features of the land, and then commercialize it in order to support the upkeep, some kind of a park or a heritage or preservation center. There are different, lots of variations on that theme. The big question that we really, and the big discussion that we have, is it really a social enterprise? And so what you have to keep in mind is that to be a social enterprise, primarily, you have to be selling goods and services, regardless of what the purpose is for. It may be to create employment opportunities within a particular community. It may be to respond to a need in terms of services. There are a number of different reasons, but essentially your income, your activity has to come from the sale of goods and services. So if you're a nonprofit that is dependent on, let's say, government grants, or as a charity from donations, Centraide, things like that, you may have some social enterprise within your organization. For example, a church that runs a thrift store to serve its community. So it is selling goods and services, but it's not its primary activity. Its primary activity is to be a charity and to alleviate poverty in a variety of different ways. And so this is something to keep in mind when you're looking at what it is that you're going to do. I'm not criticizing any of these other activities. It's just that you have to look at the structure. And as a social enterprise, you are, in effect, creating a business that has a social purpose, and that the profits are redirected to other things other than dividends to shareholders or partners. And in the work that I've been doing generally, although I think it's very interesting evolution, the social purpose corporations, B corporations as they're sometimes called. And so these are entrepreneurs, these are people who form companies that have a social purpose as part of their mission, as part of their work and their activity, but they're still structured as a regular corporation. They still generate a profit, and that profit goes to individual shareholders or partners. There isn't a membership per se, and there's no democratic governance. So despite some of the interesting things that are evolving that area, it's not what we consider to be social enterprise at this stage. So this brings us to Quebec, and Quebec is a world leader. We have 11,200 social enterprises, 13 million members belong to them in various different ways. over $47 billion in revenues. And if you look at the literature, if you look at the landscape around the world, Quebec is certainly up there. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Nancy Niemtam, who's joined us, and she has certainly been a part of that as a leader in the world of the social economy. It really is quite something, given the scale of the social economy around the world. And so if Quebec is a world leader, so where are we? The English-speaking community. And this is where this journey then took off in the last few years, as we're talking about developing the English-speaking community, enhancing its vitality, all those good things that we do in the work of community development. And it was basically an assumption that the English-speaking community, despite the fact that Quebec was a world leader, really wasn't very present in the social economy. And it has been a revelation to me in sort of thinking in the work that we've done, which I'll describe in a minute, that the English-speaking community does have a very strong history of collective action. The English-speaking community developed its own schools and educational institutions. At one time, built its own hospitals, which of course now are integrated into the overall health system of the province. Churches were present in virtually all communities, and as Bill mentioned at the beginning, we've had a very strong tradition of volunteerism, and so that was our sort of action of a collective nature, and it was institutional rather than entrepreneurial. And so when you look at the landscape for collective enterprise, social enterprise, we're not as present at all, and certainly in comparison to our Francophone colleagues, in a very small way. We have a few fisher co-ops, Magdalen Islands and the Lower North Shore, Agripura, which of course is one of the larger co-ops, the dairy co-op. A lot of English-speaking farmers are members of Agripura. And in the work that we've done in sort of looking around the landscape, there's been quite a bit of activity in Montreal, but it's been individualized, it's been small enterprises. A lot has been associated with students, particularly Concordia. And of course, the ever-increasing bilingualism around Montreal in terms of are you an Anglo, are you a Franco, and that companies and institutions and social enterprises are made up of, are not particularly around language. They're there to serve the community on a local basis and may speak several languages. So generally speaking, the English-speaking community is not present to the same extent as the Francophone community. However, there are different areas where there has been quite a bit of activity. And so what have we been doing to change things? And my favorite sort of backup to that question is the Red Green show, where he always closes at the end and says, we can change if we have to. Well, we're going to, I think. There's a lot of interesting things that are going on. So starting back in 2019, the Secretariat, after some discussions, provided QUESCREN with some financing to look at the whole aspect of the social economy. So the questions that I've just been through in the mandate of the Secretariat to look at the English speakers and what's going on and how can they help with that development. And so QUESCREN has undertaken a study of which they hired me to do, which looked at the social economy and also particularly what role could Concordia play in developing further ideas, concepts, research, initiatives in the social economy. And that's been completed and is being reviewed for distribution at some future point. And in the meantime, the Quebec government renewed the action plan, the Ministère de l'Économie et l'Innovation, for 5 years. And so there was an opportunity to get something going on the ground. And so the Secretariat engaged with RDN, the Regional Development Network, to undertake a pilot project, if you will, that now has evolved into CNET, which is the Social and Solidarity Economy English-speaking network, to get on and look at what could be done for the English-speaking community in terms of the social economy and social enterprises. And one of the partners in that project is the Coopérative de Développement Régional du Québec. And in Quebec, we have cooperatives of cooperatives. That's how, developed the system is. And the CDRQ has some resources to provide some service and some translation into English. And that project is now entering into its second year. And although the project will is a 2-year one, there is a 5-year commitment through the Social Economy Action Plan through the Ministère. So that activity will continue on into the future. So it's been a bit of a back and forth, as you can see from the red arrows, and now CNET is finally in place and starting to take off and engage with the greater ecosystem, as we say, in the activities in the social economy. And so CNET, you can go look it up on the website. Basically, the idea is to mobilize some knowledge, because the English-speaking community is less familiar around the whole notion of the social economy, and leverage some resources, build some capacity, strengthen those connections, and develop partnerships. I mean, it's a classic community development initiative, and through that, CNET has started to engage with the ecosystem out across the province. The symbol in the middle. Sorry, I could get a logo that had their name on there as well. That's the Chantier de l'Économie Sociale, which is the officially mandated from the MEI to lead the charge in terms of the social economy in Quebec, and is really the umbrella group across the whole province and for all organizations, and has a very extensive portfolio of work and membership. And I would imagine, I would hope, that CNET would become formally involved with the Chantier at some future point. And then I just put together a few logos and a long list of names of organizations that are out there in the ecosystem doing work in terms of the social economy, cooperatives, and others. And the list from which we put together and extracted this from, this is just one page. So, there's a dozen other organizations from provincial to regional to local. It's a very extensive ecosystem across the province. And as the English-speaking community, hope to engage through the different organizations and institutions and become more present. And I don't know whether extract is the right word. I don't want to sound like a mining company, but enhance the presence of the English-speaking community for its own development. And in particular, you'll see at the bottom, there's the Poêle de l'Économie Sociale. The Poêle, it's one of those words that doesn't translate very well, somewhere between a hub and a cluster. Take your choice. We just call them the poles, which doesn't really give them justice, but there's one present in each administrative region, and they are mandated to work on the social economy on a local basis. And so, for example, the Gleaner has joined the Poêle in the Montérégie West, so that we can make connections, we can have services and other kinds of things. And in Montreal, the landscape is a little bit more complex in terms of the organizations and institutions, but there's quite a few of them that are active. So we did some background work. We created a network through which we could start to channel some energy and some activity and start to engage the community. So where do we go next? So on the left-hand side, we've got Concordia and of course QUESCREN, and newly on the scene, we have SEAS, which is a student initiative funded through the student fees that is very much into the social solidarity economy in developing internships and projects and other aspects of development work, if you will, around the social economy, help people to with some startup money and research, and particularly not only focused on Montreal, but because a lot of the student base is there. We also have, as I mentioned before, the action plan from the Ministère de l'Économie et Innovation for, coming up for the next 3 years. And they have a number of different programs that are available, and resources and funding. And from the federal government, there's two aspects. One, which is already in place and is delivered through the Chantier d'Économie Sociale here in Quebec, is the Investment Readiness Program, which provides funding for feasibility and business planning, so that groups can do an analysis of their project ideas and put them into shape so that they can then start them coming forward. And at some point, because it was supposed to be launched before, well, not before the pandemic, but I think has been delayed because of the pandemic. But there's a social finance program through Employment and Social Development Canada that's going to contribute about $750 million in social financing. And that's going to be hugely important, because that's one of the difficulties that social enterprises, including cooperatives, have is getting hold of the capital funding to get started, because of course they don't have necessarily much in the way of assets, which is what banks always want as collateral. And because they are membership based, then who is responsible for signing on to financial instruments? And so social financing is going to be extremely important for helping to develop local economic activity of a social nature. That's anticipated sometime in the coming year that program is going to be launched as well. So all that to say is there's lots going on. The report that we did through QUESCREN for Concordia is going to generate some discussions, and all the players around the table, both in academia and the students, the outreach units, if I can use that description for the different activities from the institution, combined with the work that RDN and CNET are doing, I think are going to start to move forward quite rapidly and produce some interesting results. What are some of the things that we're looking at? Part of the CNET project is to start to engage with those who have either social enterprise underway, or they've got an idea. How can we help you develop them with the partners, CDRQ and others, and the services that are already available around Montreal PME and others? Start to generate some interest and some activity. And some of the things that part of this is a personal flavor in a way, because there are many other projects, but health and housing co-ops, to me, I have a great interest in those, particularly in health co-ops, because as you probably well recognize, the health system has in my view, been overly centralized, and B, is under a huge amount of duress as a result of significant changes and the pandemic. And we have to rebuild local community services with regards to health, where you can get better accessibility, you can get response, and you can get service without having to travel, miles away to some central facility located in another region. The same in housing co-ops. It's it's not just an urban problem, but in many of the rural areas, there is a shortage of housing, and if you're going to provide reasonable accommodations, if you're going to attract new people to your area, if you're going to provide affordable housing, we're going to have to do something. We can't rely on the development market, because all they're interested in is developing, and that's how many houses can they build and sell and then move on to the next thing. So a different approach in my mind has to be taken, and so these are definitely aspects that the English-speaking community can be involved with. Community and social economic services. These would be along the lines of.
Hello, Hugh. Sorry to interrupt. I'll just give you 2 more minutes to wrap up. Is that possible? So we'll have we'll have time for conversations.
I've got two more slides.
Perfect.
So economic services, for example, in smaller communities, you lose the critical mass population, so private enterprise goes away because there's not enough money. Once you start closing the grocery store or the gas station, then people don't want to locate there because they have to drive many miles away to get those local services. So there are many different aspects of local community life that can be served through a social enterprise, and that takes knowledge, expertise, and some planning. And lastly, sustainable development in all its aspects of social, economic, and environmental. Social enterprise, social solidarity enterprises, I think, are the way to move that agenda forward, because it involves community as well as providing service. So my answer, I asked a question way back at the beginning, if you remember that far, is that what could we do? I'm always asking the question, what can we do to build, maintain, and enhance our community? And my answer to that is the social economy is one of the ways that we can do that. We are in Quebec that is a world leader. There is expertise, there is resources, there is a dynamic nature to the sector, and there is a very full range of both institutional, organizational, and government support. And I say it's time to join into that, and let's get to work. If you have any questions, you can contact myself or Olivia. Olivia is one of the social economy agents working for the Regional Development Network. And so you've got our emails there. And that's the presentation.
Thank you, Hugh. If we were in a live audience, I would say, let's have a round of applause. That was a masterful presentation. I've been teaching the social economy. I think I should invite you to give the opening remarks at one of my foundational courses. Really great presentation. Thank you, Hugh. Now we're gonna move to a period of questions. So and we're hoping to get a little exchange here. So there are two ways. One, you can write a little question in the chat on the side here, and the other way, of course, is do it in person. So what you'll use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. Under reactions, you'll see when you click on that, you'll be able to raise your hand, and I'll be able to then you'll be able to open your microphone and ask a live question. So who wants to break the ice? Lorraine.
Thanks, Hugh. I have a question about challenges. So Hugh, you've now personally been involved in a number of projects. Can you tell people who are interested in jumping in what kind of timeline they can anticipate, what kind of challenges, and where they should turn? Should they turn to CNET for starters, or just email Jason directly? Just kidding.
Well, the role of CNET is not to do everything. Perhaps as Jason introduced me as a connector, I think that's what CNET wants to do, is build that connection model so that when you knock on the door and go through, you get pointed in the right direction. And I'll give you an example, a bit negative, but I was doing some some economic development work for a client a couple of years ago, and we contacted the local CLD, which was the Centre Local de Développement. And their response was to give me a list of websites that I could refer to get more information on what we wanted to do. And I said, thank you very much, I've already done that, right? It was absolutely useless. So we don't want to be that. And so what we want to do is that when you come in with an idea, then these are the folks, the CDRQ, PME Montreal, Réseau de Coop. There's just a huge array of resources that are already there. How can we help you in English? Can we translate the documents? Can we refer to a bilingual counselor? Can we sit down with you? Because this is a great idea, but you've really got to polish it. You've got to mold it before you take it forward, because otherwise it's not going to get the response. So there's a variety of different things that you can do. But if you think of CNET as the front door that then can put you into that network, which is, I mean, it's huge. It really is. When you look at other provinces, when you look at other jurisdictions, it's phenomenal, the resources that are there. And so what we're simply saying to the English-speaking community is, hey, let's get in there and participate in this, because there are some real benefits to doing so.
Excellent. I love this metaphor of CNET as the front door. So that's the one to remember after today. If you have a business idea with a collective approach, and you're willing to use either a nonprofit or a co-op, knock at the door of CNET, email Olivia, and start the process.
There you go.
Aha, we have David Johnson asking the question. What is new with respect to recognition of English language community newspapers, media in Quebec as emerging new social enterprises, given the collapse of the old journalism business models?
Good question. Well, there are, I think, currently 32 members of the Quebec Community Newspapers Association, which is the group that represents English-speaking newspapers. Only 4 of those are social enterprises. The others are all private, independent owners. And it's one of those sort of anomalies of the community media sector, is that it's community media because it's local and it serves the community, but it's generally owned by a family or an individual, or lately by, of course, media chains that have purchased these titles. So I think there's a real opportunity, and it's not evident in this discussion, but another activity that we're carrying on through the Gleaner as a pilot project through the Secretariat is to look at all the unserved communities, English-speaking communities, Thetford Mines, Sept-Îles, other places that don't have the critical mass to support a community media. So what is it that we can do, given how important information and communication is to the vitality of a community? What can we do to help serve those communities? Do they have enough sort of critical mass to start their own publication? Is there a way they could connect into other publications that could then support them with a page in their paper or other kind, so there's a variety of different things that could be done. But I think the basis of that question is it has become quite evident with the emergence of the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, just how important local community media is. And so, yes, there's a lot of rebuilding. If you noticed in that slide, it was rebuilding community, a lot of rebuilding that we need to do because those publications were present and evident in the past, but no longer are for a variety of different reasons. What can we do to change that?
Just a footnote. Of course, we all remember when La Presse was ceded to a nonprofit organization. It doesn't, I think, qualify as social economy. It may become one, but also there's a network of French-speaking newspapers which has managed to pull off an amazing hat trick. And there is a considerable contribution from the workers into the structure through their salaries. So that's a model to look at, and for the smaller newspapers perhaps to learn from. So we have another couple. Yeah.
If I could just add to that, one of the things that we haven't got to yet, but it's on the list, is the whole issue of small business succession, which across Canada, across the Western world, 25% of of small businesses are looking for a successor and can't do that. Well, the social enterprise, social economy is one way that perhaps we could help out with that, and that's something we really want to look at. Is how can we take the benefits of the social economy, and instead of seeing those businesses, those local businesses close, how can we turn them into a community asset?
Lovely. Here we have perhaps just a comment. FWIW, I'm not sure what that means. The Chronicle Telegraph covers Thetford once or twice a year, but I'd be thrilled if we had a freelancer there. Anybody know anybody? I suggest somebody who knows somebody respond in the chat and get a little chat with Ruby. Well, let's move to Lorraine's other question here. Jason Hugh, between Concordia's SCPA and CNET, what kind of training is available?
Well, the training is being developed. This is part of the exercise, is what do we need to develop? Who are going to be the target audiences? This is all beginning in the first stages of the process. So this is definitely something that we, if people have ideas, again, it doesn't have to be just about, I want to start a social enterprise, but if you're involved in the sector, if you're involved with organizations that support community, come forward and say, yeah, we think we could do with some training, we could do with some background information, we could do with some expertise in terms of helping people to dissect their business planning and all those other kinds of things. So we're in the process of putting that all together. It is quite evident that the social economy in general and how to manage a social enterprise there's much less in the way of both formal and informal, formal academics and informal training or continuing education training that's available compared to the other aspects of economic development. So that's where it's very important to engage with educational institutions, community organizations, and with social enterprises themselves as a network, which I think is what the chantier has been building. And now we're trying to do the same thing, but to bring the English-speaking community, not to duplicate or to replicate necessarily, but to ensure that the English-speaking community is involved with the sector.
I'll also add a footnote to this. So I know Montreal, I only know Montreal, but in Montreal we have co-working spaces where accelerated learning can take place among peers. We have incubators where expert coaches can guide you through the process, learning by doing. We have accelerators in the social economy, not so many yet, but there is an infrastructure of support for that process. Outside of Montreal, there's undoubtedly going to be, through your pôle d'économie sociale local, you'll be able to find some access. Perhaps it might be in the form of a consultant, so much more gré à gré, much more intimate kind of accompaniment. But there are funds available sometimes, at least in the Montreal context, there are funds to get a consultant who can walk you through the process. The best relationship is where the consultant does as little work as possible and the person who is consulted does as much as work as possible, because you don't want to have a process at the end where all the knowledge and experience is in the head of the person you paid $25,000, right? That's just common sense. We have a couple more questions. Oh no, we have a question from Nancy Nimtan. So to you. By way of introduction, Nancy, you have to turn on your mic. This woman here who's going to speak is probably the mother hen of the social economy in Quebec, if I could call you that.
It's better than a rooster, I guess. I'm not going to ask a question. I'm just going to make a comment and maybe a suggestion. I mean, first of all, thank you, Hugh, for the presentation, and I'm glad that the messages join in. I was head of the chantier. I'm an Anglophone, and by the way, talk about history. I'm old, and I went to the NDG cooperative nursery. I was brought up in NDG, so we're talking about, you got to remember the Canadian Cooperative Commonwealth. I mean, there's a history of the social economy. The YMCA was one of the, was in the Anglophone community. So this is not new. Yes, there have been certain things in terms of account. The second thing is that there are a lot of Anglophones involved in the social economy movement. I'm an Anglophone, and I ran the show for 20 years, and Margie Mendel is our star, intellectual amongst others, but one of the stars, and so on. Jason's been around and so on. So I just, this idea that somehow the English community has been, neglected is for me is anyhow, it's subject to discussion, shall we say. But once that's said and done, I'm glad to hear that the role you want to play is to refer to the ecosystem that's out there, and where there are people that can give service in English. I mean, we know that French is the working language, but nevertheless, in a lot of places. So, but I would say that if I would make another suggestion is that, we say that the social economy, I say, and it is, that it's born out of needs and aspirations. And so in a lot of the work of building the social economy in Quebec is to start with needs and aspirations that are identified, and to see how the social economy as a collective form of action within the economy can respond to those needs. And so there's some ongoing debates where I think that a stronger collaboration of people that are living on a daily basis in English communities across Quebec, or could be important to contribute to the conversation, but also to make sure that the next steps have impact on the Anglophone community. One of them is, and again, in that context, I encourage you to be working with the chantier, because there's a whole, for example, in the relationships with the government of Quebec, there's a whole discussion going on, and there's going to be a whole process around the issue of how do we face the issue of our aging population, and how can the social economy play a role. There's already a network of enterprises that work in that area, but how can we go further? And so it would be good that people who are conscious of the realities of the aging population Anglophone communities were part of the discussions, because if you're part of the discussion, you're going to be part of the solution. There's a discussion going on, it was mentioned around aging, the government has even, created tools and is very interested in this approach of workers taking over an enterprise from an owner that's, that is retiring and doesn't have a succession within the family and so on, and looking at those options, and there's financial tools and so on. So once again, I know there's a lot of SMEs, that are owned by, Anglophone owners and so on. And are we getting to them? Are we reaching them? Are we reaching the workers that there? So, I mean, I think that's also a collective discussion that it would be good if, small business association, I don't know, but how the Anglophone community who would be the best, collective to be part of that discussion. And the other is around the issue of food. We saw during the pandemic and so on, this whole issue of, should we be producing more locally? And so I'm part of a big process with the Montreal Council across Quebec around how can the social economy contribute to building, more sustainable and inclusive food systems. So, I mean, those are 3 examples that I have off the top of my head, but I think the idea is to be part of the discussion and not just sort of wait and then sort of see where you fit in, but be there en amont, at the beginning of the discussion. So those are a few things, and those discussions take place at an organization at the level of the Chantier, or for Montreal at the level of the polls, or Longueuil, there's a poll, or Laval, and so on.
Thank you for those remarks. We have another question. We have the real question from Ruby, and so here it is. What I'm curious to know is, you touched on this a bit earlier, but what are some of the reasons the English-speaking community outside of Montreal hasn't tapped into the social economy as much as other communities? Language, perceived lack of need, bureaucracy?
Probably a combination of all kinds of factors, not just one in particular. Part of it is that I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, a very strong institutional base in the English-speaking community. So we had service through another means. And then it's also sector-based. The English-speaking farmers and fishers have been involved in the cooperative movement, much more so than other aspects of the community, because it was very important to their economic and social development. So it varies across the board. And I think, as Nancy pointed out, there's been actually, a lot of activity. But I guess my point is that we haven't done it in an organized fashion, in the way that we don't have cooperatives of cooperatives in English, right? So what is it that we haven't done in this sector to increase? What is it that we need to do to get people to join in and to benefit, I think, from a lot of the aspects of the social economy? So part of it is that the English-speaking community has done its own thing. Part of it is that structurally we've had a different approach, and it's not, again, not a criticism, but I think the thing is that the social economy presents a great opportunity for social and economic development for communities of any kind. So why aren't we taking more advantage of it in an organized fashion? So let's go.
All right, here's our last question from Marian Pinsky. How can the community at large, that is not currently affiliated with academia, nor with a community organization or social enterprise, get involved to contribute to the vitality of the English-speaking community?
Wow, did you say we only had 5 minutes?
Give it a 30-second spot.
Yeah, 30-second spot.
Yeah.
Well, knock on the doors. Whether it's CNET, or whether it's RDN, or whether it's QCGN, or whether it's ELAN, or QUESCREN, or whoever it is, knock on that door. These are networks, these are organizations with resources and connections, and are not going to be none of us are in a position to do everything. And that, second of all, very important within the development, is we just don't want to keep replicating and duplicating things when there's lots of expertise in service. Just how can we adapt that so it's more readily available, attractive to the English-speaking community? So in that sense, it's the old thing: take that step forward and knock on the door, go through the door, and find out what's available on the other side.
Excellent. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to answer one more question because I see I can very quickly. Dorothy Williams asks, what are the usual costs associated with transforming sole proprietorships or nonprofits into a social economy? How long does it take to get money to underwrite the process? I'd like to just draw attention to the fact that there is a program specifically designed to allow for when a private company is going to end because there's nobody to take it over, for the workers to take it over in a worker co-op or even as a nonprofit. There's a government program specifically designed for that, and what it pays for are the consultants to help the core group through the process. That's its principal purpose, and you can get quite some interesting amounts of money to help through that process. So if you want to know more about that, email me directly, and I will help you. I'll put my email in the chat as well. I think that we have to end today. It's been extremely interesting. So thank you, first of all, everybody who's participated in this. Thank you very much for taking up your lunchtime to listen to some people talk about social economy. That really warms my heart that there's interest right across Quebec. I want to specifically draw attention to the fact that we're going to be doing an evaluation after this event, and we're going to send you a link, and we're going to ask you to take a couple more minutes to just give us a little bit of feedback so we can improve the next time. I need to acknowledge that this event was made possible through the financial support of the Secretariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise. I think that's most of us. QUESCREN also receives funding from the Department of Canadian Heritage, the Canadian Institute for Research on Linguistic Minorities, and Concordia University. I want a special shout out to Lena Shumarova and her QUESCREN colleagues for producing this event. She's been extremely helpful. And of course to Hugh, who not only was presenting, but also doing the tech support. If you're looking for the cutting edge on how to manage Zooms, I would chat with him. He's also a private consultant. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today, and have a lovely day. And we'll see you at the next one.